All right. Hi, guys. So, this week we finally got to look at a business intelligence scenario. And it's always a little bit harder to apply the just intelligence principles to a business intelligence scenario because, I personally believe the justifications have to be even greater to using intelligence work, seeing how we're not dealing with national security. Um, it's for the success of the business, or it's to please shareholders, or it's their bottom line. So the use of intelligence collection practices should be held to a higher justification standard, in my opinion. But just remember to be careful and watch your biases. And we're going to get into different types of biases in the coming weeks. Just be careful uh, and decide ahead of time what you think is ethical. Uh, don't decide ahead of time what you think is ethical and then try to mold the just intelligence principles to fit your situation. If you do this, you can come to the conclusion that it's not ethical, or it could even end up being the other way around. So always just go through the entire uh, list of principles and then go from there. But if you do find yourself trying to tailor your just intelligence principles to fit your situation, just take a step back and try to look at it from a different perspective. But let's dig into it and start with just cause. And this one was probably the most debated out of all the principles in relation to the scenario because we look at it and argue that, well, there were 200 attempted hacks already. So there's just cause to take action. And I agree there's just cause to take action. But the type of action we're trying to take, I don't believe is justified under this principle or any other one for that matter. And I'll explain that as we go along. However, if there were any principles you could make fit, it would be just cause because they've tried to attack our company 200 or more times in the past week. Um, and they're trying to cause harm to us and find out something about us, collect. So we just have to take action, but not to the degree that we are talking about in this scenario. Others said there may not be just cause yet because they haven't got through our defense yet. And I made this point to those of you who didn't talk about this. So, as annoyed as we are that the competitive company is trying to collect on us, our IT and our intrusion defense has, I would say, more than held its own, as they have walked away with zero information. To me, that's a huge success. And I said to a few of you, maybe even IT needs a raise. So, as annoyed as we are, we don't exactly have the level of harm we're talking about. And I will get into levels of harm later. But we do need to consider proportionality and right intentions. So this one is about 50-50 depending on how you look at it. One way we have just cause to do something, but if you look at it the other way, we don't have just cause to do anything because so far they haven't harmed us at all. Um, so moving on to authority, a lot of you said the boss would have the authority because it's his business to have you set up this honeypot. It's his business, so he can have you set up this honeypot if he so desires. Um, I would argue that if what we were doing, and a couple of you pointed this out, but what we are doing here is an offensive honeypot with a Trojan horse attached to it. Um, if we used a defensive honeypot, we might have a better argument. A defensive honeypot will allow them to come in and allow them in and find out what they're looking for and find out where our weaknesses are, so then we can improve our defense. And that doesn't cause harm to the other company beyond just stopping them from their bad intentions. So there's no harm there. I would say if you're looking at Bellaby's ladder of escalation, it's a 1 or lower. Um, but if we set up a honeypot that actually has a Trojan horse in there, so when they come in, it attacks their system and it shuts their systems down, that is actually espionage and that's legal. And two wrongs don't make a right. Hacking is not okay, and what they're doing is not okay. But by attacking back offensively, we're engaging in espionage. As you can see, we have a legal obligation as well as an ethical obligation to do the right thing. So, what is the right thing? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But back to authority. If we were to use an offensive honeypot, we would have to go to law enforcement, most likely that being the FBI. They would, in fact, be the authority if we were to do something like that. It's not just corporate leadership or ownership. It's beyond that, and likely a governmental authority. That brings us to right intentions. A few of you thought we might have had the right intentions, which was to keep our company safe, which, if you look at it from that perspective, you could say we had the right intentions. But because we were going above and beyond and causing harm to someone else, I think this is just an act of revenge. The truth is, this competitor company just has been an annoyance and hasn't caused us any harm. So by trying to harm them, we don't really have the right intentions. Now, last resort. Most of you realize we definitely didn't meet the last resort. There are so many other ways we could go about this before going scorched earth. Our owner could try to reach out to the other owner of the attacking company and talk to them and just ask, hey, what's the deal? Might not be effective, might, probably not, but we could engage in a smear campaign against them for hacking, leak the information to the media of how many times they've hacked us and that they've been hacking us consistently. And that could harm them just as much, if not more, than any type of cyber countermeasure we incorporate. But the most likely thing we should be doing is taking this to law enforcement. And I think that would ultimately harm the company, but it would be done lawfully. It may not even harm the company directly at all, as an investigation will probably ensue, and law enforcement could take down the hackers and maybe even those who are directing them to do the hacking. So ideally, we can even minimize harm that way. So an offensive honeypot is definitely not the last resort. There are so many other ways we can go about this, and this leads us into proportionality. Is what we're doing proportional to what was done to us? Did we step it up one notch, or did we step it up 10? And I think clearly we are trying to step it up 10, as no harm has been done to us. Lastly, discrimination. And I think this one was virtually split down the middle. About half of you considered that the competing company is a legitimate target. But you have to break this down a little bit more and use a little bit of critical thinking here, more in the way Bella B would have you do, and think through who is affected by this situation. So, yes, the owner, the hackers, and whoever else is involved in the decision making to do the hacking are absolutely legitimate targets. They entered the game wittingly and are fair game. However, all the people that work for our competing company and their shareholders and their customers are not legitimate targets. And by setting up an offensive honeypot and Trojan, we are most likely harming the employees more than anyone else. Because if the company does shut down, the employees will be the ones hurt the most. And most likely the employees have no idea what's going on. They're innocent bystanders in all this, and they'd probably hurt the most from our attack. So, with all that said, ultimately this would not be an ethical thing for us to do, and we're looking at business intelligence and not dealing with national security here, so our stakes are a lot higher in a lot of ways. One thing to remember is, although we can apply Bella B's principles to business intelligence, but the fact remains is they were created for people in national security and even law enforcement. So for some of you looking for a nice thesis as you climb through your postgraduate progression, might be a great thing to study yourself. Try to come up with your own way of applying Bella B's just intelligence principles to business. Because I feel like they do need to be shifted a bit, and they're not going to be exactly the same as when we're dealing with national security or even law enforcement. So that's my thoughts on Module 5, and feel free to reply below with any questions or concerns, and good luck in Module 6.